authorization here. There are authorized to be appropriated to the Secretary to carry out this section $10 million for each of the fiscal years 2010 through 2014. Just so all the members know, we have spent all the year's income by April the 16th. Everything that we spend here, we have to borrow from our kids and our grandkids and the Chinese and everybody else who wants to loan us money. Page 148, 25 points. In the case of any proposed plan or portion thereof consisting of new construction. So now we've got a new government formula to determine winners and losers when it comes to the building of new housing. On page 149 at the bottom, for purposes of this paragraph, the Secretary shall identify rating systems and levels for green buildings that the Secretary determines to be the most likely to encourage a comprehensive, environmentally sound approach to ratings and standards for green buildings. So the government's going to decide what's green, not the American people. In identifying these green rating systems, the Secretary has to take into consideration the ability and availability of assessors and auditors to independently verify the criteria and measurement of metrics at the scale necessary to implement this paragraph. She also has to improve indoor and outdoor environmental quality through enhanced indoor and outdoor air quality, thermal comfort, acoustics, outdoor noise pollution, daylighting, pollutant source control, sustainable landscaping, the use of building system controls, and low or no emission materials, and such other criteria as determined by the Secretary. So why are we giving the Secretary all of this authority under this Act to determine virtually everything? Let me get to page 153. The Secretary may, by regulation, adopt, apply, for purposes of this paragraph, future amendments and supplements to and additions of the National Green Communities Criteria Checklist, any standard or standards that the Secretary has determined to be substantially equivalent to such checklist, and the green building rating systems. So a lot of power for the new Secretary without any congressional oversight. Now, I really hate to do this, but when you file a 300-page amendment at 3:09 a.m., the American people have a right to know what's in this bill, and have a right to know what we're voting on. Let me get to the bottom of page 155. Revision of appraisal standards. Each federal financial institution regulatory agency shall not later than 6 months after the date of the enactment of this Act revise its standards for the performance of real estate appraisers in connection with federally related transactions under the jurisdiction of the agency to comply with the requirement under the amendments made by paragraph 1 of this section. So now we have to retrain every appraiser in America so that they understand this law, so they know how to properly appraise the value of someone's property. And, I haven't finished. And they need to meet the requirements established pursuant to subsection F for qualifications regarding consideration of any renewable energy sources or energy efficiency. So every appraiser is not only going to be retrained, but now we're going to have to send them all to school. Let me get to page 157. The Appraisal Subcommittee, another new part of the bureaucracy, shall establish requirements for state certification of state-certified real estate appraisers and for state licensing of state-licensed real estate appraisers to ensure that the appraisers are qualified to consider, in determining the value of a property, any renewable energy sources or energy efficiency or energy conserving improvements or features of the property. Interesting. And the Secretary on page 158 shall require the Housing Assistance Council to encourage each organization that receives assistance from the Council with any amounts made available from the Secretary to provide that any structures and buildings developed or assisted under projects, programs, and activities funded with such amounts complies with the energy efficiency standards under Section 284A of this subtitle. More power for a lot of unelected bureaucrats. Then on page 160, middle of the page, it says, in general, the Secretary shall use amounts in the fund to provide loans to states and Indian tribes, to provide incentives to owners of single-family and multifamily housing, commercial properties, public buildings, to provide renewable energy sources, and it goes on and gives a whole long list. But there's no appropriation here for it. And then on page 164, we authorize another $5 billion. And there's no idea where this money comes from. Page 165, green banking centers. We're just not going to do houses and commercial properties and multifamily housing. Now we're going to have green banking centers. The federal banking agencies shall prescribe guidelines encouraging the establishment and maintenance of green banking centers by insured depository institutions to provide any consumer who seeks information on obtaining a mortgage, home improvement loan, home equity loan, or renewable energy lease with additional information. Are you kidding me? And I've heard of blackmail, but now I know what green mail really is. On page 170, at the top of the page, section 299F, the General Accountability Office reports on availability of affordable mortgages. Really, after we drive the price of every mortgage up in America, we're going to have them to do a report on affordable mortgages. Guess what? They're going to be a hell of a lot more expensive. We get to page 173. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development may make commitments to a guarantee under this section and may guarantee the repayment of the portions of the principal obligations of eligible mortgages that are used to finance eligible sustainable building elements for the housing that is subject to the mortgage. So now, we're not going to guarantee the mortgage, but we're going to guarantee the improvements to the property as well. Page 180. And I would direct all of your attention, if you have a copy of this, to section 3 of that page. The full faith and credit of the United States is pledged to the payment of all guarantees issued under this section with respect to principal and interest. Oh, no, it's here. It's right here. The full faith and credit of the United States is pledged to the payment of all guarantees issued under this section with respect to principal and interest. The term green portion means, with respect to an eligible mortgage, the portion of the mortgage principal referred to in subsection 2 that is attributable as determined in accordance with the regulations issued by the Secretary. So, we got a new government program, and we're going to guarantee this with the full faith and credit of the United States. And on page 184, on April 1st or a later date established by the administrator under subsection J of the calendar year in which the term offset credit expires, the owner or operator holds for purposes of finally demonstrating compliance or allowance or a domestic offset credit. I read it because I cannot tell you what that means. On page 190, at the bottom of the page, it talks about algae. And on page 189, we got renewable biomass. But this is the third definition of renewable biomass that we have just in the manager's amendment, much less the bill. This caught my attention at the bottom of page 191, section 3.